So here we are, instructional video number 1 for floor framing systems. Um, we met last with the Zoom meeting, and I went through and I talked about all the different components that we discussed and we took notes on during school before the break. But now we're moving forward with some new material, new territory. So I want to talk about spacing out your joists. How do you space them out? Or what I always call it layout. How do you lay them out so they're going to be properly in place? Before we can begin, make sure you have a piece of paper, have something to write with. I'm going to ask you 3 specific questions as we go through the video and answer those questions down. Take a photo of it, submit that on Canvas. That's how you get credit for this assignment. So that's your forewarning. Okay, so laying out joist, studs, rafters, why is it important? Number 1, when you want them to be equally spaced, so it looks nice. Also, so it has the proper amount of support. So when you go to put your subfloor on, okay, your subfloor, it's not too stretched apart, so when you put the weight on it, it's going to support it. So it's strong enough. So it looks nice, it's strong enough. Lastly, when your subfloor finishes, because it's only a certain size, it's not, they don't make this stuff to go across the entire house. It will land on a joist, so it's properly, has enough strength and it's properly supported. So we'll get into more information as we go. But first thing is, what measurements do we use for layouts? There's 5 different measurements that we use. Okay, the 2 most common are 16 inches on center and 24 inches on center. So this, from the center of one joist to the center of the next joist, it'll either be 16 inches or 24 inches on down the line. You want to maintain that pattern as best as possible, as close as possible. Other measurements will be 8 inches or 12 inches or 19.2. Now there's different applications for these. Again, the 2 most common are 16 and 24, and that can do your whole house. And there's nothing wrong with either of those as long as it's got the proper amount of support for whatever weight you're putting on the floor. If you're putting on a ton of weight, you want those joists closer together to help support that weight. So 16 and 24, those will work in most cases. 19.2 is used sometimes when you want to save a little bit of material but still want to have it a little bit stronger than 24 inches. If you are, and when you would use 8 inches seems pretty close together. And just give you a rough idea here. Here's 24 inches apart. Here's 16 inches apart. Okay, 12 inches apart is kind of like this, right? That's something that you might come into account. Maybe it's actually a little farther apart, like kind of like that. 8 inches is actually more like this. So both 12 and 8 inches, you would typically use those if you are in the master bedroom and putting in a large whirlpool tub, or if you're on a deck and you're putting a jacuzzi tub on top of that. All that water in the tub and in the jacuzzi tub, like the hot tub, it's a lot of weight, especially with the hot tub because it sits there all the time. You always drain out, your jacuzzi tubs when you're done the bath, but the hot tub, that weight stays there. So you need to be closer together to help support all that weight. So, so my first question for you is, what are the 2 most common on-center patterns? Okay, I gave you 5 total, but I said 2 of them are the most common. So take a minute, write that down, and come back and join us. All right, next thing you need to know is, when I say 16 inches on center, when I say 24 inches on center, I'm not talking about making a mark at 16 inches, 24, 16, and every multiple of 16 on down the line, and putting my joist right on the side of that. That's not what I'm talking about. The center of your joist needs to be at 16 inches or 24 inches every increment down the line. So what you've got to understand is there's got something called an offset. Okay, it's a measurement that you add to every layout number as you go down, and it helps you stay that your center of your joist is exactly on. Okay, for this work we're using 2x6s. There's a little scrap piece of 2x6. Now the thickness of the 2x6 is the key component here. Now it's not actually 2 inches thick. It's actually 1.5 inches thick. Why? I'll get into all that at a different point in time. But it's 1.5 inches thick, and you need to know that in order to get your offset correctly, because your offset is totally determined on how wide your board is. So if I'm using a standard 2 by blank board, 6, 8, 10, 12, so 2x6, it's 1.5 inches thick. If I'm using a TJI joist, and remember we talked about those in the video, TJI joist has a bottom cord, and it's got an OSB piece of web, so it looks like this. So it's the width right here, which is usually about 2 inches. It might be 1 3/4, but it's a little bit wider than this, and you'll take that measurement into account. Or if you have a wooden floor truss, you know, it's got 2x4s laid flat as it goes through here. That 2x4s are typically, when you look at the width of this thing, looking at it sideways here, this measurement here is about 3.5 inches. So, or let's say you're running a beam. The thickness of this beam is what you take into account. So your offset is not standard. Your offset varies depending on which type of floor joist system you use. It's all based on the thickness of that. So how to find this is you take your thickness and you divide that by 2, because that's how you're going to find the center of this board. Okay, so 1.5 inches divided by 2, I'm going to save you a lot of math, it's 3/4 of an inch. So what you're going to do is find your mark on your tape, and let's say your mark is, if I wanted a joist right here at 48 inches, I'm not going to put a little mark at 48. What I'm actually going to do is find that 48, and I'm going to add 3/4 of an inch. Okay? This is what's known as setting behind. When you set behind, you simply add 3/4 of an inch to every layout increment. In this case, it'd be 24 inches. Here's my 4-foot mark, which is 24 times 2. So 48 plus 3/4. Okay. Then, while you're here, you're going to put an X on 48. And you're going to square up your line. Okay. So here, I'm going to put a little arrow. So X goes on 48, and your mark goes on at 48 3/4. Now, I'll try to bring this closer. You guys can see this in a little bit better detail here. Okay, so you can see how the number 48 is pointing right at that X, and the 48 3/4 mark on my tape measure is sitting right on that squared line. That's going to give me a very accurate position for my joists. Now, that's setting ahead. No, that's setting behind. You might also run into setting ahead. And that's simply taking your measurement and subtracting 3/4 of an inch. So, and you might run into this, because this is actually how I learned how to frame. You subtract 48 minus 3/4, that's 47 1/4. So there's my mark. Okay, so this one here would be, and I'm writing upside down so you guys can see this. Here, this is setting ahead, this is setting behind. Okay, set ahead, set behind. Either way you do it, as long as you maintain that pattern, whether you're setting ahead and subtracting 3/4 all the way down, you're setting behind and adding 3/4 all the way down, it's going to be right. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to use our tape measure, use our speed square, use our marker, and we're going to make these layouts on this. Now, this board is just a piece of whiteboard, and it is something I made as practice, but you would be doing this on a sill plate. You would be doing this on girders, or you could be doing this on header joists. Either one, you'll put your layout markings and you'll do your measure markings and squares. So, question number 2 I want you to answer is, what is the offset measurement for a standard 2x6 joist? How far do you measure over off of your layout markings to get your board in the right place? What's that offset measurement? Okay, when you have that written down, come back to video and begin again. So I do want to talk about something. I just showed you a few of the basic symbols, but I want to talk about a little bit more in depth what these symbols are. Okay, so you're gonna find 2 things. The proper layout for a joist stud rafter looks like this. It's a simple line squared down with an X. Now also, notice how I'm using my square. See how when I tilt my board up, it doesn't fall down? This is the proper square setup. Use that raised edge, pull it tight down. If you just try to do this number or try to lay it across here, notice how it doesn't stay. Or if I do it like this, it doesn't stay. Guys, you're doing it wrong. So use that square, that raised edge of the square, pull it tight to the board. Make sure it's square and not kicked off to the side, because that's going to cause problems. Okay, so 2 simple marks. The line, what that's going to be, let me slide this over a little bit better so you can see. This is going to be where the edge of my board sits. Okay, so I want this right at 24 3/4 or 16 3/4. So that's where this line is going to be. That means this very center of my stud, which would be right about here, okay, that's going to be exactly at the measurement I want it to be. 16 inches, 24 inches, 12, 8, whatever it may be. Then my X, this tells you which side of the line to put this on. So if I just simply had a line every 24 3/4, and I just had a line there, if somebody else was building this, how would they know where to put the stud, where to put the joist, where is it going? They wouldn't know. So while you're laying it out, it's the person's responsibility to throw an X where they want that joist, stud, or rafter to go. Now, I typically use X's. Some people out there will have a J. That can get a little bit confusing once you are, it just can be a little confusing. So I say, guys, use X's if it's just your common or your on-center joist, stud, or rafter. Just use an X. It's a little easier to just remember there. So you will cover up your X, and you will put your board right on the side of that line. Okay. Now, those are the symbols that we used. Now let's talk about getting this thing laid out properly. So with your tape measure, they've got some things in here to help you. Okay? If you're running 12-inch or 24-inch on centers, every 12 inches down the tape, 12, 24, 36, they have a symbol at the top. It looks like a little house. They'll say 1F, 2F, 3F, or whatever multiple of 12 that is. And that's just an easy way for you to find your 2-foot centers or your 24-inch centers. 2 feet, 4 feet, 6, 8, 10, 12, all the way down the line. If you're using 16 inches on center, the numbers are actually highlighted in red. They're either written in red or they've got a little red box around them, 1 or 2. So 16, 32, 48, 64, 80, 96, all the way down the line. And this goes all the way down your tape. So it takes the guesswork. So you don't have to sit there and think like, okay, all right, 16 times 3 is 48. 16 times 4 is 64. 16 times 5 is, you don't have to do that. It takes all the math and the guesswork out of it. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you a wrong way to do this first, and then I'm going to talk about why it's wrong, and then I'm going to show you the right way to do this. Okay, so down here, the bottom of my board, I'm going to do this wrong. I'm going to hook my tape on here. I'm going to mark it at 24 inches. Okay, my next one, I'm going to mark it, I see I move my tape, right? And I'm going to mark it 24 inches. I move my tape again, and I'm going to mark it at 24 inches. Right? I'll repeat this all the way down the line. Okay? There is a problem with this. There's actually a couple problems with it. Number one, it's slow. You're going to have to move this one stud at a time, one joist at a time, all the way down your entire 40, 60 foot wide building. It's just silly. Okay? Second reason, and the more important reason why it's wrong, if you don't get your tape measure lined exactly up with the mark you just made, if you're over a little bit, that pushes this next measurement down some. And then if I come down here and if I'm over a little bit again, that pushes the third measurement down even farther. So you won't be where you need to be when you get wider, farther down your board. So that's thing number one. Number two, some people will say, like, okay, I'll do it, because you also, third thing wrong with that is you forgot the offset. Never just mark 20. 24 is your onset measurement. Never mark 24. You never mark on 24s. I'll say, oh, I'll remember my offset this time. I'll still do that. So 24 3/4. Then they come down here. They line it up. They go 24 3/4. They come down here. They line up. They go 24 3/4. All right. Again, this is adding another 3/4 with every subsequent joist, which is going to be bad news. Let me show you the right way to do this. So again, hook it on the top here now. Stretch your tape out as far as you can. The 25-foot tape, so you can go a good long ways with them. All the way down, lock it in place, and then you can come back to your first mark. So 24 3/4. So 24 is our on-center measurement. So I'm going to put a mark at 24, right? And then I'm going to come down here at 48. Excuse me, I'm not going to make a mark at 24. I told you guys not to do that. I'm going to make a mark at 24 3/4. I'm going to come down to 48. I'm going to add 3/4 because I'm setting behind. That's my 24 or my 48 3/4. Now I'm going to come down 2 more feet. So 72 3/4. So 2, 4, 6 feet. Right? Now, when I take my square, I square these up. Okay? The line is the side of the stud that I want this on. But if you look close here, if you look close at this, you can see how my first mark at 24 was not on. My second mark at 24 is a little bit closer, but I just wasn't set up right. And I actually ended up right where I needed to be by the time I got to third joist. But keep going, and it's going to go past where you need to be. These other middle marks here where I did 24 3/4 between each one, because I accounted for that offset, you can see how this is far off. This is like 1.5 inches off. So really, the first joist needs to be 24 3/4. Then you can measure 24 from that point on. But the best way to do this is to stretch your tape out one time and mark that offset on each one. So 24 3/4, 48 3/4, 72 3/4, all the way down your tape. Do it one time, and it keeps you accurate. Now the other thing is by the time I get back here, what side of the line do I put my joist on? Oh, I forgot. Here's what you got to do. Here's how you combat that. When you have your tape out, go ahead, put your line at 24 3/4, and then put an X on your 24. Here's your 48 3/4. X goes on 48. Here's your 72 3/4. X goes on 72. So looking at this is the proper setup here, and I'm going to do just a quick 24 and 3/4, that's my line, and my X is at 24, okay? 48 and 3/4 is my line. X is on 48. And next one down here. 72 and 3/4 is my line. X goes on 72. Okay. Now, one other thing you want to do, make sure you have an X on both ends. Okay, just to make sure that everybody's on the same page and that they know, hey, a joist has got to go on each end as well. But this right here is a properly laid out 24-inch on-center joist pattern. So this is what it should look like when you're done. Now you don't have to write the measurements. That's just so you guys can see exactly what I'm doing here. So that is one of the systems that we use, one of the layout patterns. The next one I want to go through is a 16-inch on-center layout pattern. Same process. So the 8, the 12s, 16s, 24s, exact same process. You're just using a different number on your tape to make each mark. Okay, so 16-inch on center. We'll do this video, and then we'll do this layout. We'll wrap this video up here. All right, so now I'm using all these red numbers. Remember I said 16s are every red. So red plus 3/4. That's what you got to find. So 16 3/4 of an inch. X goes under 16. Jump down to your next one, which is 32 inches. Excuse me. 32 3/4 is your mark. X goes under 32. Next one down is 48. 48 3/4. X under 48. Now again, notice how I'm marking and Xing at the same time. It's going to just save a whole lot of headache as we go. All right, 64 3/4, X under 64. 80 3/4, X under 80. Okay, X on this end. Now I'm going to come back through here and I'm going to square this up. Now the squaring does a couple of things. Again, I talked about it earlier. That will make sure that your board is not twisted when you go to put it in. You certainly don't want it twisted. If it's twisted, it's just going to be messed up. Okay, so going back to the beginning of this here, it looks like a G. Okay, 16 3/4. My mark is at 16, or my mark is at 16 3/4. Okay, my X is on 16. Coming down here, we've got 32 3/4. X goes on 32. Okay, next one down, 48 3/4. X goes on 48. Marks down over here at 64 3/4, and then X is at 64. Last one down here, 80 3/4, and the mark is at 80. The X is at 80. Okay, so this is what it would look like with a 16-inch on center stud pattern. You notice now they're a little bit closer. We only had 3 common joists in this last one. Now we have 5 across this middle section here. So they're a little closer together, gives you more support, more strength for a higher weight rating of your floor. And it'll also be less bouncy. It'll feel stiffer. So that's why a lot of people run 16 inches on center. So this is what we got them all set up here. Okay. Again, if you run an 8 or 12 inches, same process, you're just using a different thing here. The only one that's different is 19.2, but again, I'll talk about that in a different video. So go ahead and erase all this. While I'm erasing this, I want you guys to answer question number 3. What is the first measurement for the line that I squared across here. So I came over, I made a little mark, and I squared it across. I put my X right here. If I'm running with a 16-inch on center pattern, okay, what is the measurement of this line right here? What's my first rafter, or excuse me, first joist measurement for that layout? Yeah, that's question number 3. When you're done with that, as soon as the video is over, just make sure you submit it on Canvas. So what we've talked about today is how to lay out 4 floor joists. And again, these marks would be put on sill plates, girders, and header joists. And that way you can make sure all your joists are spaced out properly and everything is proper. Okay. Next, get this turned in on Canvas so I can get it graded. After this, be checking into Canvas, know what the next assignment is, and stay current on your assignments, guys. If you fall behind with the work, it's just going to be a lot to catch up once we get back in school or at the end of the year. You don't want to have 50 or 100 assignments to do, because it's just not going to be really feasible to go back and do all that stuff over. And they're starting to impose late penalties and zeros for missing work. So start getting caught up, please. If you guys do the work on this end, everything's going to be good. You don't do the work on this end, it's not going to be very great for you. Okay, next video, I'm going to show you guys how to lay this out on a 4 foot by 8 foot platform with a girder down the middle, just kind of like where you guys were with those tabletop flooring platforms that we were on at school. And then that's going to be, every step will be from there. So laying out the girders, putting in the header joist, getting those properly laid out as well, installing joists, installing blocking, installing subfloor. That takes care of a simple floor system. All right, see you guys in the next video or Zoom meeting. And try to get in those Zoom meetings there. I'd like to see more people in those meetings. It'd be more fun. All right, good night.